Recently, I did a video on the top 5 three-row SUVs, and in that video, I mentioned how I scored all 240 of my three-row SUVs, and so that's what I'm going to dive into today. For this video, we'll be looking at the 2019 Volkswagen Atlas, an SUV that scored pretty high on the list but didn't quite make it into the top 5. First of all, we're going to look at the gas score. Now, to do this, we take the city gas mileage, which in this case is 22, and the highway gas mileage, which is 26, and we'll divide that by 2 to find the average, and this gives us our combined gas mileage. So for the Atlas, that is 24. Now, to get the score, we'll take our combined gas mileage and we'll divide it by the average of all the SUVs that we have. And then we'll multiply that number by 7.5. All right, now the cargo space works similarly. So first of all, we start with the cargo space with the seats up, which is 20.6 cubic feet. And there's also the cargo space with the seats down, which in this case is 96.8 for the Atlas. Divide that by the average of all the SUVs. So we take the numbers that each of these will give us, and we'll multiply each of them by 7.5, like we did with the gas score. And for the Volkswagen Atlas, for the seats up, that gives a score of 9.7, and for the seats down, that gives a score of 8.1. But the problem that I was having is that by having 2 scores for the cargo space, it gave a lot of weight to that score. So what we did is we just took the average of those 2, and for the Atlas, that gave a score of 8.9. Now, the safety score is actually already pretty simple. I took the safety ratings for the front, side, and roll tests, and for those, it got a 4.5, 5, and 4-star rating. And we took the average of those, and that just gave us a 4.5. The NHTSA already rates their cars on a scale of 1 to 5. All I did for these was just multiply it by 2, which for this case, for the Atlas, would be 9.0. So for the complaint score, I would take each car and I would take the number of complaints per 10,000, which for the Atlas, that is 5.77, and I would divide it by the average for that year. Not all the SUVs, but just for that year. We took the number that we got by dividing by the average, and we multiplied it by 2, and we would subtract it from 10. So for the price, I would take 3 different prices. I would just take the average of those prices just to give me a general price or value. We divide it by the average for its respective year. So we multiply it by 2, and then we subtract it from 10. Now for value retention, we just take the price that we found for the previous score. So here we have our price, and then we divide it by its original MSRP. So we divide those two. So for the 2019 Atlas, we were finding that it had held 83.91% of its value. So we take that 83% and then we divide it by the average for that year. But like the earlier scores, we'll just multiply it by 7.5. And for the Atlas, that gave us a score of 7.79. Okay, so after finding my 6 different scores, I would take the average of those 6, and I would use that to create an overall score for each SUV. And so instead of just picking the top 5, because if I did do that, I would only have, 3 different cars to pick from here. So instead of just picking the top 5, I picked the top 25% and grabbed the cars that occurred most frequently. And if a car only showed up once or twice, so for example, we have the 2020 Kia Sorento, the Mazda CX-9, the Nissan Pathfinder, the 2019 Atlas, and the 2020 Atlas. Like I'd mentioned at the beginning of the video, it scored high, but it just didn't show up enough to get into the top 5. Anyways, that's how I scored my top 5 3-row SUVs, and I understand and I admit it's not a perfect process. I'm not a statistician. I didn't go to school for this. However, I think for the purposes of my videos, it does a pretty good job, and it's still a work in progress. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.